Here on this podcast, we have done a number of episodes on sleep, on weight changes, on hormone replacement therapy, on aging vibrantly, on how to eat to feel better. And one thing that we really haven't talked about enough that is happening to a lot of us during this perimenopause, menopause, midlife period is brain fog, cognitive health. And I really don't want to leave that out because it's all connected. So let's talk about it. Welcome to Mind Your Midlife, your go-to resource for confidence and success, one thought at a time. Unlike most advice out there, we believe that simply telling you to believe in yourself or change your habits isn't enough to wake up excited about life or feel truly confident in your body. Each week, you'll gain actionable strategies and, oh my goodness, powerful insights to stop feeling stuck and start loving your midlife. This is the Mind Your Midlife podcast. Every now and then, I put together from my video recordings from creating this podcast bloopers. And I try for them to be my bloopers as opposed to guest bloopers, unless I know the guest is okay with it. So guests, you should feel safe in that way. But almost every blooper is me saying something along the lines of, wait, what were we talking about? I don't remember. What was I asking? What did you say? I can't remember what we were talking about. It's brain fog stuff. Almost every time it's brain fog stuff. And this has happened over and over and over again. Maybe in honor of releasing this episode, I will share some of those bloopers again on social media. So make sure we're connected. I'm everywhere almost at Cheryl P. Fisher. So brain fog is what's happening when you can't think of the word and you're trying to say a sentence and it's something that you know how to say and you know the word, but you cannot get it out of your mouth. It's when you put something down and then 2 minutes later, you can't remember where you put it down, or you come into a room and you can't remember why you're in the room. And I will say, backtracking, retracing your steps works really well for that particular issue. But this happens to us a lot. It's when you meet someone and you pay attention to their name and then you still can't remember a few minutes later. This is brain fog, and it does tend to increase in perimenopause and menopause. And so my guest today, Dr. Creatine Boev, is going to talk us through why this is happening. You know, I'm a bit of a brain science nerd. I love to hear how everything works and what we can do, because I'm not going to leave you without something to do. So Creatine is a scientist and researcher who has devoted her career to creating protocols to help women deal with physiologic changes related to perimenopause and menopause. She is focused on health and wellness, and she is focused on everything about that period of life that really can be even age 35 and above. I usually say 40s and 50s, but it could be earlier. She's a health coach and she is a PhD scientist with particular expertise in nutrition, supplementation strategies, and strength training. So I am super happy that we get to talk to her today. Welcome, Creatine.
Thanks for having me.
I am excited to talk about this because I feel like every time I turn around, somebody, including me, is talking about perimenopause, menopause, all the stuff. I've had many episodes on this, but we don't always talk enough, I don't think, about the brain fog, cognitive health piece. So first, tell me and tell our listeners a little bit more about how you're approaching this from a science perspective related to your background.
Yeah. So when I went through perimenopause and menopause, it was a pretty traumatic time in my life. And as a researcher, as a scientist, I was like, okay, there's got to be some evidence based solutions to navigate through this period of life. And I went straight to the literature to try to understand what was happening and how to fix it. And so, with an N of one, I started experimenting on myself, mainly through nutrition, fitness, and supplementation. I didn't go into the hormones just yet. I was earlier on in the process, and that wasn't really required. And so, what I was able to do was really transform my own health, fitness, wellness, my own brain health so that I was feeling like myself again and really feeling optimized. And like most women going through perimenopause and menopause, I had some significant brain fog, meaning I couldn't find my words. I wasn't as articulate. I wasn't as sharp. And in my line of work, I need to be on. I need to be the voice of authority. People need to trust me. And if you can't find your words and your brain is foggy, then, that trust really isn't there. It has to do with sleep, it has to do with nutrition. But I think the root cause of brain fog during this time, during midlife, is inflammation.
Mm. Interesting. And well, a couple of things you just said, I know that if you're listening, you were like, "Yeah, that's me, that's me." And I can't even tell you how many times I edit this podcast and I edit out, "What's the word? What's the word?"
Yeah.
I do know that everyone feels what it is that you're talking about. We feel this in a deep and personal way. And so I have reassured listeners before that these things are not forever and they don't mean we have dementia. And I'm interested to see what you say about inflammation because to me that says it also doesn't have to be forever and it's not necessarily related to dementia. So tell us more about inflammation.
So, inflammation is the root cause of all neurodegenerative diseases: dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, early cognitive impairment. It all starts with inflammation. And what I like to do when I work with women is let's talk about our body as a vessel and how do we fuel our vessel appropriately. Because if you're following the standard American diet that is full of highly processed, fried foods that cause a lot of inflammation, trans fats, and we'll talk about insulin in a minute, then what you're doing is you're constantly putting your body in this state of inflammation. What happens, and if you're one of those people and you're on this roller coaster of high carb, high glycemic index, and you're spiking your blood sugar repeatedly throughout the course of the day, you're developing insulin resistance. Now,
Mm.
why does this have anything to do with brain health? Your brain consumes the majority of glucose and requires the most amount of insulin than any other organ in your body. And
Really?
so, yeah. Oh, it's a very insulin dependent, glucose dependent organ because there's
Oh,
so many neurons, right? That are firing. We're not going to get too sciencey. However, when you have insulin resistance, then you are having this cycle of high blood sugar, low insulin, high blood sugar, low insulin, and your brain is going through chaos. So that's why they call Alzheimer's disease type 3 diabetes. Because when you've got increased levels of glucose in your brain, it doesn't allow for cellular repair. It can promote the buildup of those amyloid plaques, and your neurons aren't firing appropriately. So all of those things, right? So you're in midlife, you're probably not eating that great, you're going through perimenopause and menopause, you're dealing with hormonal shifts. And the consequence is your brain is like, what is happening? Because I can't do what you're asking me to do because I'm so inflamed.
wow. So the inflammation is a byproduct of just how we're living. And I can't think how many years ago now, but I actually changed quite a bit how I was eating
Hmm.
because I was getting my feet always swollen and, just other weird things like that. And I said, something has to change. And it made a huge difference. So we'll talk more about that, I'm sure. But I totally agree. What is it that then sort of catapults it into a bigger problem during this perimenopause, menopause phase? Is something changing as well?
Well, during that time, and again, this is probably repeated exposure over time. So this is, if you're not eating well in your early 40s, you probably didn't eat that great in your 20s and 30s either, but your body was able to compensate. We got away with anything at that age. You went
Mhm.
to college, you drank beer, ate pizza, nothing really didn't matter. You were good.
Yeah.
Once your body starts to get older, when you're in your 40s in particular, is when we see it more than anything, your body isn't able to rebound and compensate for the repeated assaults in terms of that inflammation. And it starts to take a toll. And that's where you start to notice, I can't find my words. I'm really moody. Let's talk about how this impacts mental health, right? You have anxiety, you have depression. Your brain houses your sleep wake cycle, so you're not sleeping. And so it's showing up in all of these ways where before you would have been fine, right? You kind of
Yeah.
compensated, but we just can't compensate anymore.
Yeah. I often say, I mean, I say this all the time, not even just often, that we just need to take a little bit better care of ourselves during midlife because we just need to, period. It doesn't have to be crazy, but a little bit better. And it's kind of what you're saying. Like our bodies can't recover or rebound or handle as much as quickly as they used to. And I just want anyone listening to realize we're not saying that you may as well lay on the couch for the rest of your life, but a little bit different is true. Yeah. Yeah.
It's tiny tweaks really that make a big difference. When you start to pay attention to how you're fueling your body and you're putting high quality fuel and also the relationship with food. If we stop looking at food as a treat, as a reward,
Mhm.
and start looking at it as this is how my body functions, it's how I make energy, it changes that dynamic. So you look at something like French fries or chicken wings and be like, I don't really need that because I know what's going to happen to my body when I introduce this dirty fuel into this beautiful
Mhm.
vessel.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to realize at first. It feels kind of disappointing to know that your favorite, food from whatever place or thrown in the microwave does this to us, but I agree learning is power for sure. So, what are some good choices if someone is saying, "Okay, I understand," and I know we're going to talk about some other things, but I understand that inflammation is really key to this issue. So I want to eat differently. Are there some kind of main principles that they can follow?
Well, what I like to do is I like to do just a 30-day reset where we eliminate the foods that most commonly cause inflammation. And in the United States, those are dairy, gluten, sugar, and alcohol. And
Mhm.
people are like, oh, don't make me give up alcohol. I would never make anybody give up anything. But if you really want to pull back the curtain and figure out what your body feels like when it's in a lower state of inflammation, those are the four main culprits. So, what I like to do is say, listen, it's 30 days. Like for 30 days, let's just pull this stuff out of the equation and fuel our body with really high quality protein. Carbohydrates are actually your friend, good fats, and just stay away from the junk, the processed foods, and see how you feel. And usually in that first week or so, people are like, "Ugh," right? It's that your body being like, "But I really liked that stuff,"
Uh-huh.
right?
Yep.
And then around day 10, they're like, "Christine, I don't know what's going on, but I feel clear. I feel bright-eyed. My skin is better. I have more energy, and I'm sleeping better." And I'm like, "Yeah, okay." Once the 30 days is over, I just like to, okay, let's try the dairy. Try it and see how you respond. Pay attention. Are you getting a blemish? Are you getting more mucus production? Or are you totally fine? And that's amazing. So everybody's different. But those are the 4 that really universally are gonna impact women negatively. Maybe you just eliminate 1 for right now just to see how you feel.
Yeah, that's actually how I realized that I needed to not have gluten in general in my
Mhm.
diet because I realized I'd taken it out for a while and then had it again, and it made me sleepy.
Mm,
And I read somewhere that that could be that it's hard for me to digest or something like that, but I don't even care why. It made me
yeah.
sleepy, and I realized I don't wanna feel like that, so I guess I won't eat it. So it is powerful to see how it affects you for sure.
And just for your listeners, gluten made in the United States causes inflammation because it pokes little holes in your gut and it causes leaky gut syndrome. And if you go over to Italy for the summer and you eat the pasta, you're going to feel amazing. It's a completely different way of processing the way that we make gluten. And
Mhm.
it's not, our body doesn't recognize it as real fuel. And it just causes a lot of distress. So that's why I don't know anybody who would go and eat a couple slices of Wonder Bread and feel good afterwards. Right?
Right. And I guess when we were young and we were eating that in the 70s and 80s, number 1, maybe it was different. Number
It
2,
was
our bodies could handle it better, maybe.
both.
Yeah. Yeah. And it, what if somebody can kind of reduce some of these things, but it's quite hard to take sugar fully out. Some people choose to take alcohol fully out. But what if you just reduce? Does that have some positive benefit as well?
Oh, absolutely. And it's a relative reduction. So when I was in my early 40s, I had a glass of wine maybe 2 most nights. I had young kids, I was cooking dinner. It was my way to unwind and it was very ritualistic. I very much looked forward to that.
Hmm.
When I got older and the wine didn't agree with me anymore, it caused a lot of headaches. It completely wrecked my sleep. I was like, "Okay, I can't do this anymore." So, maybe I only drink, like, on the weekends. I don't drink at all anymore because it simply makes me feel terrible. But
Hmm.
any moderation is going to be better than the alternative. So, if you have high fructose corn syrup in your fueling plan, and we know it's highly inflammatory, but you just love Twizzlers, then okay, maybe don't for now, right? Don't eat them every day. Let's figure out a way to just pull back and then notice how you feel when those substances aren't part of your diet.
Yeah.
Your body, when you pay attention, gives you a lot of signals. We're just often not listening to them.
So true. So true. And we just kind of eat what we've always eaten, follow the habits we've always followed, and we don't think about it. I agree. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. So inflammation is one thing and maybe the biggest thing. When we chatted before this interview, you also mentioned a few other things that could potentially impact our cognitive abilities, our what's the word problem. And so let's talk about some of those because if I recall, they were things that maybe we could fairly easily do or add as well.
hmm So, the number one supplement that I recommend to women in midlife is creatine. And the studies on creatine and brain health, specifically in women during midlife, are very strong. And it kind of makes sense because creatine helps us make energy. And when we are having issues with brain fog, also has to do with a significant decrease in energy production.
Huh.
And, creatine was marketed mostly to like younger men back in the
Yeah.
90s. It's going to help you build muscle. And all of that research was done on college aged men. We're finally looking at okay, but how do these things impact women? And these studies were done on women. So simple, right? Creatine monohydrate is the safest supplement. It is studied over and over and over again. And what I tell my clients is let's start with 5 grams a day. It's clear. You throw it in, I put it in my coffee in the morning
Oh,
and the
okay.
cognitive benefits are undeniable, truly.
Wow.
And so people don't realize that something that is inexpensive, safe, effective is going to help because, again, it makes more energy. And that is going to allow your brain to work better. So for me, that's an easy one.
I agree that that's an easy one. And my husband, in fact, already puts creatine in protein shakes or whatever he feels like putting it in. But I never even considered doing it because I thought it was for muscle building.
Hmm.
You are the first person that has kind of solved this puzzle for me and put this together. And now, of course, I'll do it because if you're listening, I fully agree with Christine that, you could take this little scoop of powder, you can put it in whatever, and it doesn't really change anything about what you're drinking. So I'm just amazed. Yeah.
Yeah, so Cheryl, I would start doing that. And for your listeners, creatine is something that you take every day. It's not just on days that you're in the gym. It takes 2 weeks to kind of fully get saturated into your muscle cells. Now, one question people will have was, well, I hear it causes bloating.
Mm,
It actually doesn't. What creatine does is it pushes water into the cell, and it's through that mechanism it helps us make more energy. So initially, you might feel a mild bloat, but that's going to resolve as your muscles get fully saturated. So the big thing is just take it every day and be real consistent with it. If you start taking it and you feel any sort of mild GI discomfort, cut your dose in half for a little bit and let your body get used to it. But most people tolerate it really, really well.
interesting. And I'll pause here and say, of course, we're not giving any individual medical advice.
Yes,
If you have any concern, go see your medical professional.
absolutely. Yes, no medical advice. This is what
Yes.
works for me.
Yes, exactly, and I will definitely do it. It's in my house already, I just didn't think it made sense, and I definitely didn't think it had anything to do with brain fog and all of this that we're talking about, so it's
Yeah,
amazing.
and pay attention once you get to that 2 week mark. Really see like how you feel cognitively and how it impacts you because I think you're going to notice some really positive changes.
That's amazing. Okay, I'm basking in that for a second. What else? Is there more?
So the other thing that has been shown to help health is hormone replacement therapy.
Uh-huh.
And now that we've lifted the black box warning off of hormone replacement, what we have found and what the science really shows is that taking hormone replacement, specifically estradiol and progesterone, is actually protective for your brain and your heart. There was so much confusion in the early 2000s with the women's health initiative and hormones cause cancer. What we know is that is not the case. This was misinterpreted data that really impacted a whole generation of women who didn't have the opportunity to do that. When I talk to people, I say hormones are the gas in your gas tank. You know,
Mm.
nutrition is the fuel, but the gas itself is your hormones. And so many of us are walking around with an empty tank and we wonder why we're not feeling well. Anxiety, depression, mental fog, sleep disturbances, hot flashes, all of those things. And so talk to your provider. I think now it's people are getting talked to all the time, OBGYNs, functional medicine doctors, and say, Are hormones right for me? And it's personal, right? It's very personal and it's very different. But the science, the research is very clear that if you're concerned about brain health and prevention of Alzheimer's disease, then this would be one tool in your toolbox to help with that.
That's amazing, and the listeners know this because I talk about it regularly on episodes, but I started hormone replacement therapy about 3 months ago, maybe, and so I'm getting to the point where I am noticing a difference. I'm definitely noticing a difference, and I'm gonna be very curious to see, the blood test results in a few more months and things like that as another way to look at it, but it's also been easy, and I would encourage people to take a look just as you're saying because it's it's taking progesterone once a day and then usually a patch for the estradiols.
I've been on hormones for a year,
Mhm.
and it really helped to flip a switch internally that was very dim.
Right.
And I really felt more like myself. I've gotten my spunk back, and yeah, I feel more vibrant. And that's everything, right?
Yeah, that's amazing. So I know we don't want to go too sciencey for our listeners, but can you, is there a way to kind of help us understand how these hormone levels affect cognitive health in that sort of brain science way without going too difficult?
Yeah, I mean, so your brain, in order to have enough energy, and it kind of goes back to the original conversation about glucose and inflammation and energy. The reason that people feel better on estradiol and progesterone is it helps to improve energy regulation. And it does it in a couple of ways, but let's talk about progesterone. Progesterone, you take at night, and it's a very calming, soothing hormone. If you're sleeping better, if you have higher quality sleep, then naturally you are going to have better energy. The other thing that happens is when you go through the proper cycles of deep sleep, right, which is often lacking, your brain gets a bath. So there's this system called the glymphatic system. And when you get into that deep, deep sleep, it washes in cerebral spinal fluid and it gets rid of the icky stuff like the amyloid plaques that can cause Alzheimer's disease.
Mm,
If you're never getting that deep sleep because your hormones are out of whack and you're having night flashes and sweats and things like that, you're missing out on a huge opportunity to improve your brain health.
wow.
Estrogen, on the other hand, is more of your thermogenic, metabolic hormone. It helps us to be more energetic, more interest in intimacy. It helps us with metabolism. And again, it's all about energy. And so, if our hormones are optimized and we're in a place similar to where we were maybe in our 30s, early 40s, you're simply going to feel better, function better, and you're also going to be a more pleasant person to be around.
Yeah.
And that's huge, right?
It is definitely huge. Yes. So I don't want to take us too far down a side path, but I figure if a question comes into my head, then maybe others are thinking this too. So we've talked about Alzheimer's a few times, and I also feel like I've heard and read a little bit that it can be hereditary. It can kind of run more in some families. How does that interact with what we're talking about, where we can maybe eliminate some of the risk by doing these things?
hmm So every disease process has some sort of genetic component, but there is a gene that they've identified, and if you have this gene, then you're at higher risk for Alzheimer's disease. Similar for breast cancer, and that you might do everything right. Be the healthiest person with a really great body composition, and unfortunately, due to genetics, it's tough, right?
Mhm.
But you can also mitigate your risks. And there are so many other things that cause a lot of these chronic diseases. The big four. So if you and I are going to die soon, it's going to be because of heart disease, cancer, diabetes, or neurodegenerative like Alzheimer's disease.
Mhm.
And the root cause of all four of those diseases is inflammation. So if we can mitigate those risks, then we're going to decrease the likelihood that we are going to die of any of those chronic diseases. Type 2 diabetes is completely preventable, right?
Mm.
We know that it's related to insulin resistance. So if we can fuel our body, move our body, maintain a healthy body mass, then our likelihood of getting diabetes is pretty low. Cancer, too. If you're obese, your risk of cancer doubles. So we've got to take that really, really seriously. So, yes, there's a genetic component to most every disease, but we can certainly mitigate those risks. And I want your listeners to really come back to this notion of inflammation as the underlying mechanism for all of those things that are going to cause us to decline.
Okay, that makes complete sense to me. We're all starting maybe from a different place, but we can all minimize our own risk. And so that makes sense. Absolutely. I caught something earlier that you said, coming back to inflammation. You said our fueling plan. And what I think you meant was eating plan. And I love that you said fueling plan because it kind of switches the focus, right?
Yeah, I hate the word diet. I think it's so negative and it just has this restrictive connotation. So, what I like to do, especially with women, is let's talk about how we're going to get enough of the right fuel in our bodies so that we are optimizing our health. And specifically, and I'm sure you have talked about this in the past, but protein is going to be your best friend.
Mhm.
And so instead of focusing on restricting, I want to make sure, okay, Cheryl, you need to get enough protein. You need to hit your protein goal every day so that you're optimizing your fueling. Because again, I like to say I'm a really awesome sports car, Lamborghini, Ferrari, Porsche, whatever. And I'm not going to put dirty gas in my sports car because I can't expect it to run well. So, how are we going to fuel in a way that's going to make my sports car run at the highest possible level?
Yeah, I love that. And last follow up on that one, because you also said carbohydrates are your friend, and I agree. And I want us to maybe provide a little bit more detail to that because there's some carbohydrates that are really not. So the
Mhm.
ones that are, how would you kind of describe those?
Yeah. So these are going to be your natural carbohydrates that come from the ground. So I eat a lot of potatoes, sweet potatoes, every kind of rice on the planet. I probably eat rice most days. Rice is great for you. And then starchy vegetables, any of your cruciferous vegetables and fruits. What you want to avoid and how we have destroyed our carbohydrates is stuff that comes in a package or a bag because it's just so processed.
Mhm.
And so, if the majority of your carbohydrates are coming from the earth and they're coming in the form of vegetables or rice or potatoes or fruits, you're going to be in really good shape because what those do, and again, this comes right back to inflammation, is they don't cause a spike in your blood sugar. And that
Mhm.
is going to prevent insulin resistance. So if you get a bag of Oreos, and those are carbohydrates, and you eat them because they're so highly processed, your body doesn't really know how to handle it. So it releases a ton of insulin to try to manage this massive amount of glucose that we just ingested. What that does is it spikes our inflammation and it's this vicious roller coaster. If you start your day with Oreos, you are going to be on this cycle all day long and you're going to be very hangry because you started your day with a highly processed carbohydrate. So what for breakfast, start with high protein, good healthy starchy carbohydrates and some good fats. And your blood sugar is just going to be like this. And that's what we want. We want stable blood sugar all day long and that's going to help to prevent this massive amounts of inflammation.
Yeah, and I'm so happy that we've made that connection for people with regards to brain health and this brain fog that we get because I just don't think that that connection is talked about enough. Tell us if somebody wants to find you, learn more about what you do, where can they do that? How can they do that?
Yeah, so my website is mastermenopause.com and I'm also very active on all of the social media channels and if you put in Dr. Christine Boev, you will find me. And if any of your listeners have just any general questions, shoot me a message. My passion is problem solving. And so maybe you just have a couple questions and I would love to help you with that.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So then my last question for you, and this is for those of you listening that are doing the laundry, driving the car, washing the dishes. What is one thing that somebody listening really needs to remember? They can't remember it all maybe at once. They need to just listen again. By the way, just listen again, save it, listen again. But what's one thing that they really need to remember?
Listen to your body. Your body is constantly giving you signals and messages. So if you're noticing that you're having brain fog and you can't find your words and you don't feel as sharp, that's feedback. And don't ignore the feedback because it's not going to go away. So listen to your body. She's always talking to us and giving us some signals that we need to pay attention to.
I love it. I love it. Very good advice. Well, Christine, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited for your creatine journey.
Me too. I love that key item to remember. Listen to your body. And you know what I say at the end of every episode, treat yourself just a little bit better during this period of time. There are a lot of podcasts out there, a lot of bloggers, a lot of people on social media telling you a lot of things that you have to do in this period of life. You have to do 10 things in the morning and you have to do 17 things in the evening and you have to change everything about how you live. I don't agree with that. I think it's overwhelming and I think it is sensationalism a little bit. I said it. What I do strongly believe is that we don't get to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just because we don't have the energy, the capacity to do all these millions of things doesn't mean we can't treat ourselves a little bit better, just a little bit better. Change something about how you fuel your body. Consider some type of supplement. Look into hormone replacement therapy. Find out whether any of these things are good for you. Be a tiny bit more active. Be a tiny bit more mindful. Those little things we can really do and we will see results. And that's the amazing part. So I hope this was meaningful for you today. And maybe we'll all start remembering the word we wanted to say. Now, if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, if you would go to that main Mind Your Midlife page and tap the 5 stars for a rating, that would be amazing. It helps tell the apps that this podcast should be shared with even more people. And if you're on Apple, you can also write a review, which is even more powerful. It doesn't even have to be super long. I appreciate you taking the time to do that. And in the meantime, as I just said, midlife is our time to take a little bit better care of ourselves on the outside and on the inside. Just a little bit better makes a big difference.